presentation, it will explain on how expectation about future yields can cause yields on instrument with different maturities to move together. Expectation also state the interest rates of interest rates on a long-term bond will equal an average of short-term interest rate that people expect to occur over the life of the long-term bond. For segmented, it is a theory about theory of term structure of interest rate that views bond to differing maturities as non-substitutable, and after their yields they differ their yields, and it will be because it will be determined on separate market. For each market will be determined on its own unique yields.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nur Aliatul Adawiyah binti Norizham. Our presentation title is to distinguish between expectation theory and segmented market theory. Therefore, I will explain the assumptions for expectations theory and segmented market theory. First, assumptions for expectation theory is that it is a perfect substitute good. Bonds with different maturities is considered as perfect substitutes because short-term interest rates are expected to rise or fall and will differ the yields. Therefore, future yields can cause yields with different maturities to move together. Bonds with different maturities is considered as perfect substitutes and the expected return must be equal. Next, for segmented market theory, the assumption is that it does not substitute goods. This theory views bonds with different maturities as non-substitutable, so their yields is different because it is determined in separate market. Therefore, the expected return on bond with one maturity has no effect on demand for bond with another maturity. So, as we can see, the assumptions of expectation theory and segmented market theory is that expectation theory is a perfect substitute goods, meanwhile segmented market theory does not substitute goods.
Hello and Assalamualaikum. My name is Nurizan Shahiran and my part is to explain about interest rate on bond for expectation and segmentation theory. Firstly, for expectation theory, the theory says the interest rate on the long-term bond will equal an average of short-term interest rate that people expect to occur over the life of the long-term bond. To make the theory in the short explanation, we can simply say that short-term interest rate will determine the interest rate on the long-term bonds. While for segmented market theory, which market segmentation theory states that long and short-term interest rate are not related to each other because they have different investors. In addition, the interest rate for a bond with a given maturity is determined by the supply and demand for bonds in the segment with no effect from the return on the bonds in other segment. So here, what can I conclude that for expected theory, short-term interest rate will decide the interest rate on the long-term bond. Meanwhile, for segmented theory, the interest rate for the short and long term are not linked to each other. Therefore, thank you.
To talk about advantage and disadvantage expectation theory and market segmentation. Okay, for advantages expectation theory. First, expectations theory gives a fair understanding of the interest rates to the investor willing to invest in any type of bonds, short term or long term. Also, the theory assumes that long term rates can be predicted by using short term rates, so this excludes the scope of arbitrage in the market. for disadvantages of expectation theory. Even investors should be aware that the expectation theory is not always a reliable tool. A common problem with using the expectation theory is that it sometimes overestimates future short-term rates, making it easy for investors to end up with an inaccurate prediction of a bond's yield curve. Another limitation of the theory is that many factors impact short-term and long-term bond yields. The Federal Reserve adjusts interest rates up or down, which impact bond yields, including short-term bonds. As a result, the expectation theory does not consider the outside force and fundamental macroeconomic factors that drive interest rates and ultimately bond yields. So for market segmentation, the advantages. First, the marketer can spot and compare marketing opportunities. He can examine the needs of each segment and determine to what extent the current offering satisfies these needs. Second, the marketer can modify his product or service and marketing appeals to suit the target segment. And lastly, for the disadvantages of market segmentation. Market segmentation suffers from the following disadvantages, which is increases cost. When a firm attempts to serve several market segments, there is a proliferation of products. Cost of production rise due to shorter production runs and product variation. Larger inventory has to be maintained by both the manufacturer and the distributor. Also one of the disadvantages. And lastly, production and distribution expenditure increase when the separate programs are used for different market segments.
Before we end this video, I would like to explain about the example for expectation theory and the segmented market theory. Expectations theory. For example, the investment in bond for 2 consecutive 1 year's bond yields the same interest as the investing in 2-year bond today. While for segmented market theory, for example, first, short horizon investor, such as the commercial bank, whose major liabilities consist of the short-term deposit, would prefer the securities that have the short-term maturities. On the other hand, long horizon investor, such as the insurance company and the pension funds, whose the liabilities have the longer maturities, would prefer the securities that have the long-term maturities.